Did we just do this? Okay. All I'm doing is,
Recording in progress. We should be good.
well, yeah, but we need to get to your PowerPoint. That's the bigger issue. It's there. Why are you? Yeah. Oh, here we go. I guess what we can do is we can run the audio through this one, like the laptop, and then run the screen so they can see the picture that way. How's that sound? Oh, there we go. And we'll start meeting. I can do that. Yes. Okay. Now. Okay. All right. Good now.
Okay.
All right. So sorry about that, guys.
That was like every technology issue I think I've had in like 3 years, all in half an hour.
So apologize, but thank you guys all for coming. Before I turn it over to our speaker for today, just so you know, next month's Lunch and Learn is going to be a history of Hollow Weekends out at Cedar Point. So that one should be really interesting. And we'll probably have another pretty good sized turnout for that one as well. But now that we've waited long enough with all of our technology issues, I'm going to turn it over to our speaker today, Molly Sampson, who is the director of the Maritime Museum of Sandusky. And I'm going to lower the lights so people can actually see.
All right, well, welcome. Today we're going to explore a very brief history of the Sandusky coal docks. This is one of those topics that if you really want to dig into it, we could. All right, how about now?
Nope. Now try it.
Well, that was a. I said, how about now? The microphone wasn't on yet.
Now try it.
Now? Good. Okay, so this is one of those topics that we could like dive into for 6 months. It's still not totally covered. So this is a very brief history of the Sandusky coal docks. So this map is from 1870, kind of showing what Sandusky looked like at that time. And you can see the confluence of all of our shipping industries at that point. We have sail in the bottom corner, we have steamboats, and then if you look off on the left side, you can see the rail line coming in. Now, Sandusky had been a pretty major player at the early part of the 19th century. In fact, at one point, we were outpacing Cleveland in size. Obviously, that momentum didn't continue for a variety of reasons. But one of the things we did keep up on was coal shipping. So there's several factors that contributed to our significance in the coal industry. Our location on Lake Erie provided easy access to water transportation, as we can see here, because coal is one of those industries that requires both ground and sea transportation in the 19th century. This allowed for the efficient movement of coal from mines in southern Ohio and surrounding states, across the Great Lakes, and then eventually through other water passages to international shipping. Our proximity to coal mines. Ohio's rich in coal reserves, particularly in bituminous coal. Our proximity to coal mines in Ohio and our neighboring states like West Virginia and Kentucky made us an ideal hub for coal transportation. The development of railroads in the early mid-19th century connected Sandusky and further enhanced our transportation infrastructure. As some of you may or may not be aware, we had the first railroad here in 1846. We have a nice little marker downtown for the Mad River Railroad as well. So if you haven't seen it, go check it out. And this infrastructure allowed for the seamless transportation of coal from rail cars to ships. And it became more and more seamless, as we're going to find out. And the coal shipping industry in Sandusky had a significant economic impact on the region. This created jobs, it stimulated our local economy, and contributed to the growth of related industries and services. Kit, do you want to move closer? All right, how about now? Sandusky's founders assumed that Sandusky's protected natural harbor destined the city to become the leading port of Lake Erie, which is why we were outpacing Cleveland for a while. Time would prove that the entrance to the bay was not the ideal one that they thought it was. It was often blocked by shifting sandbars, and the bay was shallow and difficult to deepen because of the underlying limestone. This chart of Sandusky Bay shows some of the paths used, as well as some of the depth there. Now, the original channel into the bay, you can see, is that curved one that has like almost the 90-degree angle to it. It followed the course of the Sandusky riverbed in the direction of Johnson's Island, and then turned south to the city's waterfront. The channel was shallow and poorly marked, and boats often ran aground or hit submerged rocks. The challenging course to its waterfront docks and piers earned Sandusky a reputation as a port to maybe be avoided. This is another view showing, you can see the part of the original channel there towards Johnson Island as well. In 1889, a 17-foot deep straight channel was dug from the foot of Warren Street to the tip of Cedar Point.
Every technology problem today, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right now.
The channel was marked, but the dock channel along the waterfront remained unmarked and quite shallow. In 1895, construction was begun on a jetty at the tip of Cedar Point to prevent sand from blocking the entrance to the bay and allow better access to the new straight channel. The Baltimore and Ohio Railroad docks at the foot of Warren Street were Sandusky's first major commercial shipping enterprise. They began operation in 1846 and eventually grew to include 3 separate piers. I don't even have that popping up on mine. Okay. They began operation in 1846 and eventually grew to include 3 separate piers. Iron ore, lumber, sand, crushed stone, coal, grain, and packaged goods were shipped through the Great Lakes. Sandusky, however, was unable to attract industries that required deep water ports, and companies began to close their shipping operations during the course of the 20th century. The B&O dock ceased operation in 1973, and coal remains as the only commodity shipped from docks in Sandusky Harbor. Coal loading the hard way. So in 1891, Sandusky and Columbus Short Line established what would become the coal docks that we know today. This is the only photo I could find relevant to them. And this is very zoomed in. They only existed for a very short period of time. They went through several changes in the late 19th century in terms of names. And in 1911, they were wholly sold off. But they constructed a pier, later known as Pier Number 1, at the foot of King Street. Coal brought north on their new straight track from Columbus to Sandusky was loaded onto freighters at this pier. In these early days, men loaded freighters using shovels and wheelbarrows in the holds. Workers had to reposition the coal by hand to level the load. In 1893, the dock was equipped with a steam-driven loading apparatus known as the whirly. Workmen loaded coal into large buckets at the end of an arm that was raised and then whirled over the side of the freighter, where it was emptied and then whirled back in a continuous circle. The work was hard, but the coal business was good. By 1898, a second pier was built and the engineers began construction of a new steam-operated Thornburg coal loader on Pier Number 1. The Industrial Revolution had finally reached the coal docks and many shovels were soon to be retired. And so this is showing some freighters. This is an undated photo, but we think it's from the 1890s, if not just the very early aughts, but this is part of our collection. The Thornburg coal loader, constructed on Pier Number 1 in 1898, could raise a coal car up an incline above a ship's deck and dump its load directly into the cargo hold. It could unload 15 coal cars per hour, far exceeding the capability of shovels, wheelbarrows, and even the whirly. This was just the beginning of the changes that technology was bringing to the coal industry on the docks of Sandusky. And you can see this one. I love that this shows better how the rail line went right up to the boats on the pier. A lot of them we get so close up, we focus on the boats, not the rail line so much. In 1907, the Thornburg was replaced with a new McMyler loader that could load 25 cars per hour. So again, we're proceeding through the Industrial Revolution. We're getting more efficient with things. As technology is rapidly changing, these changes are even happening more and more quickly. And this is the George Thope from Fairport. The increasing demand for coal led to the construction of a state-of-the-art Wellman-Seaver dumper on Pier Number 2 in 1914. Now, part of this could be because we were looking at the global stage, and as the rest of the world was entering World War I, we were taking advantage of the higher need for resources that they did not have in Europe, and we could contribute to. This production would only increase after 1917 with our entrance into the war. And then we would see that pop up again later in the 20th century. But again, showing what the progress had been in 1914. This photo is, again, from our collections. I wish I could show you guys how clear it is not on the projector because the details on it are just absolutely amazing. And I think this one actually might also be in our glass negatives collection as well. But this one's scanned from a print. The final upgrade to Piers 1 and 2 occurred in 1924 when the McMyler loader on Pier Number 1 was replaced with a new Heil-Patterson high-lift dumper. This loader was designed to lift rail cars higher in the air so that they could achieve a higher dump angle that would clean all the coal out of the cars. Piers Number 1 and 2 were operated around the clock in an effort to keep up with demand, but by the mid-1930s, it was clear that an additional coal dumper was needed. In 1937, this increasing demand for coal and the construction of ever larger freighters led the Pennsylvania Railroad to announce plans to construct an entirely new pier adjacent to Pier Number 2. The new pier would be nearly a mile in length and over 600 feet wide. When completed, it would encompass 89.5 acres. A new channel was dug to provide access to the new pier that entailed the removal of 2.5 million cubic yards of silt, soil, and sand. Conveniently, most of the dredged material was used as fill for the new pier. And this is the earliest photo I have in our collection showing construction of the pier, and this is from March of 38. And then most of the ones we have are from 38 and 39, but this is the earliest one I could find. This is the next phase, about a month and a week after the last photo, showing how the dock facilities are changing. This photo series is really fabulous, and if you're into industrial photography, it's really fascinating. This is June of 38, again showing how we're using the silt and everything to fill in. The west wall of the pier was constructed of millions of tons of rock and stone. The east side of the pier, which was designed to accommodate a huge new coal dumper, consisted of many circular steel bulkheads. More than 2 million pounds of steel pilings were driven to the bedrock to support the concrete east wall cap that runs the length of the pier, and 14,000 cubic yards of concrete were poured to create the cap and foundation of the new coal dumper. And this is showing some of those concrete pilings. And this puts us into August of 38. So you can see like how quickly they're moving on it. I could be a little snarky and say they move a little faster than road construction does now. Once the pier was completed, the construction of a massive 117-foot tall, all-electric coal dumper could begin. And this is January of 39, I believe, showing the earliest stages I have photographs of the new coal dumper being built. More phases of it, April of 39. So this is about a year after that first photo we have of coal dock number 3. Finally in operation. And because this coal loader could handle all types and grades of coal with minimal breakage, the new dumper came to be known as the giant with the gentle hands. Now, when the Pennsylvania Railroad opened, had their grand opening for all of their employees with the new coal dumper, they actually put out a souvenir book called The Giant with the Gentle Hands. And it's a great example of like late 1930s graphic design and stuff, but it goes through how gentle this massive thing is. And you can come see it at the museum. We have it on a reader rail, but it's really, really fabulous. But I love this photo because, I mean, those hunks of coal are gigantic, and this is supposed to be the gentle thing. More photos from 1939. So as it progressed in the next 5 years, it would see its peak output higher than they anticipated. During the Second World War, the Sandusky coal docks achieved their peak year of production in 1944. So again, 5 years after it opened. They really got it done just in time. I'm not quite sure when they originally built it that they thought war was coming as quickly. We were still very much in our neutrality acts at that period. But with the declaration of war in Europe in 1939, the US quickly phased out the neutrality acts that we'd passed in the mid-1930s and began to prepare what we called defense production, and we engaged in Lend-Lease. So our defense production relied very heavily on coal. A lot of us think of coal as a dirty fossil fuel, but the coal we have going out of Sandusky is tied more closely to metallurgy and the coal fires you need to create better steel. So I'm not super familiar with the Bessemer process. I know it enough to go, oh, the Bessemer process. But that carbon hardened steel is what we needed to get through defense production and then wartime production during World War II, which is what tied to our peak. So in 1944, with all 3 piers and dumpers operating 24 hours a day, the men of the dock and yard crews shipped 14,247,473 tons of coal from Sandusky in support of the war effort. That is just a number I can't wrap my head around. And so the rest of these photos I'm going to show that are in color were all taken in 1943 by Jack Delano. Again, really gorgeous photos. I wish the projector was super, super clear because the details in them are just amazing. And I love the fact that we actually get color photos from the 1940s because they aren't super, super common. World War II continued. So this map shows the coal lines for Norfolk Southern Railroad. And if you look at the top right corner, The red is the tracks that you can't quite see because of the participants announcement, but it ties back to Sandusky. And then I chose this one particularly because all of the coal examples we have in the museum come from Kentucky and West Virginia mines. And you can see all of those colors are a different mining company. And then we load them onto rail lines and bring them up to Sandusky still. All right, so this video, I'm going to let a more current employee of the coal docks talk about what's going on there.
Pier was started construction in 1937. We started loading coal here in August of 1939. So next year we're coming up on our 80th loading season here. Everything on the dumper, everything for the barney is all original to the pier. The cables are on a maintenance schedule that we handle. But it's all counterweights, cables, direct drive motors. It's the technology hasn't changed. Some of the infrastructure has changed. The electrical pieces that provide power to the dumper and to the barney and to the different things have changed over the years. But the stuff you can look at visually out here, none of it's changed. This equipment was designed in the 30s. We were handling 50-ton rail cars. But it was designed to be able to handle up to a 100-ton rail car, which is what we're handling currently today. They had the forethought and the insight to be able to design a machine that was flexible and capable of handling different dimension rail cars. Our blending capability with the silos, the fact that we are a direct dump facility, we can handle coke, which is not something that some of the other facilities can handle. So it's the forethought that went into designing this place originally, I think, is what's kept it here all these years. Cars range anywhere from 100 to 115 tons of coal per car, and the cars weigh anywhere from about 50 to 65,000 pounds dry. So you're looking at close to 150, 160 tons per car. We have a rail gang that cuts the cars up that range anywhere from 25 to 30 cars. Once they're staged, we have a number 4 booster, runs off high voltage DC, and it actually indexes the cars forward onto the track that we service and weld there. Once it's spotted onto the stop rail there, the barney takes over. It's cable driven. Barney takes the car, indexes it up the hill, knocks the car out of the dumper, indexes the good barney in the dumper at the same time, and then the barney returns back on a separate rail inside the pit and is down to grab the next car. It's coal comes out of Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Kentucky, Illinois. We get a little bit out of Alabama, but mainly it stays right up here, within our area. Our loads here range from about 17,000 to 33,000 tons. We have the capability to hold a little bit more than 500,000 tons on the ground. We're probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 60-65% of that right now. What we have here and what we handle here is about 95% is all metallurgical coal used in steel production. So it's such a coke grease, such as steel mills. All of it stays on the Great Lakes. A good portion of it goes over to Canada for their steel manufacturing, but it's all used in the steel process.
That was doing that. I have to keep moving my little window of me out of the way. So in 2018, the museum undertook a new renovation. The back part of the museum had been used as our boat school. And after building the new Halman boathouse that housed the new boat school, we had the space available. And my predecessors decided that we needed to have a better representation of the coal facilities here in Sandusky. So they renovated the back half of the building, and we now have this really amazing model. It was built by Alan Shorty Parker. And if you look closely, who notices what's wrong with it? Yeah, it's backwards. It's a mirror image of the actual one. And what I've been told is the reason it was a mirror image is because that was how it would fit in his basement with the rest of his train collection. So other than the fact that you really should hold a mirror up to it, it is amazingly accurate. If you look closely on the portrait photo on the right, if you look towards the back, you can see the hunk of steel cable. We have that beside the model of the coal dock because the tiny threads that are used on the model are to scale of that one in representation of everything else. And it's really just amazing to see that size difference. And I love pointing it out to kids when we have them visiting the museum. Also in this exhibit, you can see the samples of coal. We have several different mines represented there, including Jamboree mines from Kentucky, Wind River. If you come to the museum and you want to do our scavenger hunt, hint, hint, you'll need to go that exhibit and check those out and do a little matching game. But this has been a really impressive addition to the museum, and it continues to impress visitors all year round. We love having it. So I think I have actually managed to save time and get us back to the 45 minutes I was supposed to end at. So if you want to visit the Maritime Museum of Sandusky, we're currently on our winter hours. So we're open Friday through Sunday from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Once summer hits again, we'll go back to our full hours of Tuesday through Sunday from 10 to 4. You can find more information about us on our website. You can call the museum during open hours, and then our address is there as well. So at this point, I'd like to open up for questions, or if anybody has it even better than asking me questions, it looks like we may have some experts in the room that could better contribute their stories and their experiences with the coal docks. Hi, Mary.
The one question I have is, could you repeat that large number of,
Oh, yes.
and I don't remember what you said that was.
14,247,473 tons of coal from Sandusky in 1944.
44. Thank you.
Yep, that was the peak year of production.
Notice, when were the silos built? Do you know?
I don't know, and that wasn't in the exhibit information I pulled this from. There we go, 1965. And I was remiss in not mentioning that docks 1 and 2 are not operational anymore.
The coal tonnage, coal dock increasing in the next 20 years or flatlining?
That I am not familiar enough with. I am going to rely on my laurels as a museum professional and historian of World War II to say I cannot project that. If we have anybody working in the coal or rail industry in the room that wants to take that one on, I am more than happy to. I'm seeing a lot of head shaking, so maybe not.
This guy's dad actually operated, what, the Worley?
Worley, yeah, he run the Worley train from the Pennsylvania Railroad down there.
Oh, that's amazing.
What was his name?
Bill Fleming. He run the Worley, and he coaled the engines down there at the roundhouse, and then he went down there, built number 3 dock. He got the Worley down there and do some construction work with the crane.
Oh, I love that.
Steam driven on railroad tracks. This crane was. It normally coal the engines that come up from Columbus. They brought the coal up from Columbus. He coaled the engines with that Worley. And that's how they got the coal up here, and then they went to the docks. And when they built number 3, he went over there on railroad cars and took the Worley over there to lift some of that stuff and help build number 3 dock.
Tell him how he almost died out there.
Other side.
Tell him how he almost died.
Oh, yeah, he got off where they put the fill in, and he buried up, it was like sludge, and he thought it was solid, and just black sludge, and he was clear up to here, a guy throwing the rope, he'd have drowned it down there at the coal docks. Building number 3 docks, yeah. Something back then, there was number 1, number 2, and number 3. And I think there's only one left now, that would be number 3. The other two are non-existent, they took them out. But, I think number 3 is the only one operating today. He worked down there when they built number 3 docks. I remember him coming home cold and in the winter time, just putting it up, yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing.
On average, how many people were employed in the?
That I also didn't have in the wealth of information I had. It just kept saying it was a leading industry and a leading employer, but no comparison or stats on that. We have this really great file folder in the museum that they used to build the exhibit, and I must admit, I just relied very heavily on that.
Could imagine because it was during the war, there would be a large number of people employed out there, very large number.
Well, and because it was a war necessary industry, you could use that as a loophole if you maybe didn't want to get drafted. So if you were male and still registered for selective service, if you were in a war necessary work like this or agriculture, you could actually keep your job.
They were told to keep their job. They weren't allowed to go and live. They had to fight to live.
And that actually worked for women too, even though the women's services were all volunteer, you had to get permission from your employer. So Erie Ordinance over Port Clinton, well, LaCarne then. I have a letter from a woman who wanted to join the WAC in 45. And at that point, like we're in the wind down phase, but she had to get permission from her employer. And she has a copy of the letter in with her paperwork saying like, yes, he's releasing her from her job at Erie Ordinance to go join the war effort as a soldier.
Number 1 and number 2 dock were steam operated. In other words, they had a boiler and they operated on steam. Number 3 was electric. When they went electric on number 3, but number 1 and number 2 were steam driven. They had a boiler and they had to run it with steam. Yeah.
Well, and it's a good example of the changing technologies from when 1 and 2 were built versus number 3 was built, that electric was viewed as the better option than steam.
Oh, as a child in the mid-70s, that was my playground. I actually climbed up to the very top of the mast in the middle of the picture when I was about 11 or 12 years old. And that's a true story. We were at the top. Cop car came down King Street, and we kind of panicked because we thought he had seen us. He didn't, but we scurried down that tower as fast as we could, never forget. But we played because it was abandoned, and we would come home, you know, like, we get a lot of good memories going. It was like a haunted house back then. It was eerie because you wondered what would have happened back in the times, and here it sat just totally dormant, and you had to climb through vines, and I remember as a kid just climbing up that incline. And now, like he said, it's all gone.
And how many tetanus shots have you had? All right, well, thank you all for your patience with our technological issues at the beginning.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you're open 10 to 4.
Yep, until Memorial Day, and then we'll go back to being open 6 days a week. Thank you all.
On the west side.
1400 bucks.